Trace. Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
Ground rules as we are getting started. This is to inform that the session is being recorded. So if participants are not comfortable, they can choose to not participate through the microphone and camera, though we would love to have all of you on camera and participate wholeheartedly to make the session as engaging as possible. I'll request you to keep your audios muted to minimize disruption so that we're not speaking over each other. We have Trace, an esteemed guest who will help us explore a systemic coaching approach, that starts in the quiet place of our human energy systems. And I've already seen that definition put up by somebody. So Trace, you have an impact in India, and I know that very well. And as we go along, I request you to please put your questions in the text chat. We will be addressing as many questions as possible. We've also shortlisted some questions from the questions, you had put up in the registration link. So we will ask them, and I'm guessing a lot of them Trace will answer. If they get answered, we will not be asking them again. With that, I'm totally excited about this session, and we'll get straight into introducing our speaker tonight. Trace, can we have you wave your hands vigorously so that everyone spots you amongst the small boxes on the screen? We will spotlight you shortly.
Great.
Trace has a rich work experience as an executive leader, technical project manager, and a business owner for 25 years in Canada. He trains coaches, managers, leaders, teams, and families on how to create safe space systems that alleviate suffering and elevates human consciousness. I loved that definition. And with that, I will let Trace do all the magic. So Trace, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And welcome everybody to this session that I feel so honored and grateful to be a part of. And connected to the beautiful people of Bengaluru that are literally changing the consciousness of our world, whether you might be aware of that or not. Sometimes it might not feel like that if you're in the day-to-day of a really busy organization, it might not feel like that. But I believe that is what coaching is doing, and especially with this group in Bengaluru. Before we get started, make sure that you have some paper that you can write on and something to write with, a pen and a piece of paper. This will be somewhat interactive. So do have that information available and grab that now. If you don't have it, take a moment and grab that now and have that available. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to get my screen ready to share the presentation that I have for you. And just want to make sure that you're seeing my screen. Okay, can everybody see that screen all right? Maybe yes. Shanti, can you just let me know? Okay, great.
Yes, please.
So awesome. Okay, so does everybody have the pen and the piece of paper? Just put a Y in the text if you do have the paper ready to go. And I'll just put my chat up here too so I can see what's going on here. Okay, so it looks like lots of people do have that ready. So this is a typical picture from British Columbia that shows the systems that I believe are the best examples that we have in our world of what systemic work really looks like. So I want to start off in a really good way here. So take your piece of paper and draw 3 circles on the paper like you can see on the screen right now. And once you've got those circles drawn, just put the pen and the piece of paper down on the table in front of you and plant your feet on the ground. And I'll just give everybody a couple of seconds to draw those circles and then put the paper down in front of you. We're going to set a systemic intention, and we're going to do this a little bit differently than maybe what we're used to. And so once you've got those circles drawn in the paper in front of you, take a deep breath and feel the chair holding your body that you're sitting on. And just take a deep breath and notice all of the different things that are going on inside of you. Nothing to change about any of it. You're probably going to notice some thoughts. You might have some feelings. You probably hear some sounds that are going on around you. Just notice all of those and then take a deep breath. As you notice all of those, take one of your hands and put it on your belly. And take a deep breath into your belly. And imagine that your belly actually knows how to talk to you. And when you breathe, you're communicating with it. You're giving it attention, you're giving it focus. And on your next breath, ask your belly what the intention is that it would like you to know is important today. And then breathe to listen to the answer. What is the one intention that your belly wants you to pay attention to? Just breathe and notice. There's probably a word, it could be a picture, it might be a feeling, or it might be nothing at all. That's okay too. Whatever's there is perfect. So take a deep breath and notice, what is the intention my belly wants me to pay attention to? And if you're just entering into the session and you're a little bit late, that's okay. Put your hands on your belly and ask your belly, what is the intention that you would like me to set today? And once you've got an intention that your belly is sharing with you, write that intention in the circle that's at the bottom in 1 word or 2 words. You'll understand it. So don't get too carried away with writing a whole bunch of information. Just write something in there, whatever's important for you. And now take your hand and move it up to your heart and put your hands on your heart. And if you're just entering into the session, don't worry about anything. Just join us and take a deep breath and put your hands on your heart. And as you breathe in and breathe out, ask your heart the same question. What is the intention that you would like me to pay attention to today? And then take a deep breath to notice the intention that's there. Maybe it's a feeling or a thought or a word. Whatever is there is perfect. Maybe there's nothing there, and that's okay too. Just breathe and notice, what is the intention that my heart is sharing with me today? Once you've got an intention, you can write that down in the circle in the middle. Once you've got that written down, then move your hand up to your throat chakra. Just feel into your throat. This is a sensitive area for us. And so just notice that, and notice that it might feel a little sensitive. That's okay. Just take a deep breath and notice, what is the true intention, the truth that my throat wants me to pay attention to today? And so take a deep breath and ask your throat to share with you, what is the intention you would like me to pay attention to? Take a deep breath there, and whatever you notice is perfect. And so write the third intention at the top. And once you're complete with that, put the pen and the paper down and just keep those for the end. And, you know, you can even take a moment now and write actually a couple of the words that came up for you that are intentions that you're setting for today, for the session that we're in together, because we're actually in this session together. Regardless of how we might be located in different areas of the world, we're actually all here together. And so when we're present together and when we tune into what it is that's going on in this technology called our energy system, we start to notice the intentions that our system are saying is important right now for us as individuals, but then we can also share that as well. So put it in the chat. What is the intention that you noticed that was kind of maybe the theme for all three, or what was one that was the most important, or maybe all three are important in different ways and relate to each other? And so Ravi is saying, or Gayatri is saying, be aware of everything around me. Priyanka is saying, want to be more happy. What else are people noticing there? As you write in the chat, what's your intention for today? Peace and happiness, coming from the Bengaluru chapter. And Priyanka adds, to help people around me. Rohit is setting an intention of being free from stress. Sujatha is saying being lighthearted. Wish to engage with composure. Free no matter what, even when it's feeling heavy. Surrender in the moment, awareness, presence. Okay. So these intentions are beautiful. And so we are going to set the intention together. My intention together with you today is to share my experience, my strength, my hope when it comes to systemic coaching, management, leadership in organizations, but also in life, where it's even more important. And so what are you noticing systemically when you are in your work right now? I know what I'm noticing is that there is a ton of pressure to perform, and this constant problem or stress that exists in my work with people that comes up again and again is that I don't have time or space to breathe, let alone slow down and pay attention to what's going on inside of me. You know, there's this constant pressure to perform that's going on. There's also communication and coordination complexity and clashes that happen in organizations, on teams, in my own life. These are happening all the time. And so there's this sense of communication breakdown and coordination breakdown. People are not on the same page most of the time. It seems like we're on different pages more than we're on the same pages. And if you look at any team in operational organizations, this is happening all the time, whether you're talking about healthcare or education or social work or fintech, it doesn't really matter. People are constantly struggling with communication and coordination. Then you've got this systemic notice that's going on with burnout, bullying, breakdowns, and absenteeism. And this is going on all over the world right now. And I work with an organization here in British Columbia, a health authority. And right now, the department that I'm working with is the Respectful Workplace Department. And what our responsibility there is to do is to field concerns about bullying, harassment, discrimination, discriminatory harassment, and looking at things like inclusiveness, equity, engagement, and this sort of thing. So we're noticing huge burnout, bullying, breakdowns, and absenteeism going on. Another systemic indication that I'm noticing, and that you might be noticing too, is poor self-care. Oftentimes, whether you're a coach, a manager, or a leader, you might find that you are the last person on your to-do list. And that is on a good day if you even make your to-do list. And this is a very common theme as well, is this idea of poor self-care, physically, mentally, spiritually, relationally. Then we've got a normalized environment where we are in hyper and hypo arousal. And this is where we are in fight, flight, freeze, and faint all day long. In fact, that's actually become normalized in our workplaces, in our organizations. Then we have spillover. And what spillover is this idea that, you know, we used to think in the old world that we could keep work and life separate. You know, we didn't have to actually have any kind of connection. We could silo them. In fact, a lot of leadership would say, you know, leave your work stuff at work, leave your home stuff at home. Well, the reality is that that's an impossibility because we are systemic beings. And so wherever we go, there we are. And so there's spillover from the pressure and everything you see on this page into our work life and into our home life. And it goes back and forth. So these are systemic indications or ingredients that are going on that I'm noticing, and that I know a lot of the coaches and managers and leaders that I work with are noticing in their organization. And so if these resonate for you and you're noticing them either in your own practice as a coach or in your clients' lives, just put a yes or a Y in the chat to see if we're on the right track here today, and to know whether or not this is the same kinds of experiences you've got as well. Just put a Y in there. So yes, I can see the first yes. Yeah, you can see this is a really common theme that's going on all over the world right now. And so there's this sense of this being a problem. These are real problems. And yet what if they're not problems to solve, but they're messages to listen to? And that's what our session today is about. And so my intention for our time together is to give a systemic introduction to coaches, managers, and leaders that serve to translate the systemic messages that you're hearing so you live your soul legend. And so I say that very intentionally because this is just my belief and my experience is that I really do believe, regardless of where we come from, that we are beings that are here to have an experience and to live a specific soul legend. And whether we're aware of that or not, or our clients are aware of that or not, doesn't really matter. We all come here with a mission, with a purpose. And so in order for us to live that out to our fullest, so that we really feel the joy of living our soul legend, living our work, living our life fully, this is what my intention is today, is to listen systemically so that we can access that and begin to do that, so that pressure becomes presence, so that when we're in pressure, we actually don't, it doesn't affect us. We can be present. We use it as information to feed the work that we're here to do, the life that we're here to live, so that clashes become communication, so that we can actually listen below the information that comes at us initially and start to notice the translated information that wants to be shared in a way that serves people, so that burnout becomes energy and power systemically. And it's an amazing phenomenon that burnout, when you start to harness the symptoms of burnout, you'll notice that all it really is energy that's trapped in your system that wants to release so that you can be energized and have more power systemically in your life and in your work. We want to see poor self-care become self-acceptance and self-love, because the truth is that we can't help anybody outside of ourselves. We've got to start within ourselves. And so if we're not taking care of ourselves first and we're not on the top of our lists, then we have a real challenge trying to have a systemic effect. In fact, we can't work systemically unless we're willing to start with ourselves. This is where we start to notice that body stress that we notice inside of our body starts to become spaciousness. We start to learn how to actually live in the eye of the storm, in stress and in pressure. And then spillover that is affecting our lives starts to become a ripple effect instead, a systemic ripple effect. And what I mean by that is that just in the same way, like your work you can take your work home with you and it has a spillover effect that's negative, you can also have a systemic ripple effect that is incredibly positive for you, for the people that you love, and for the people that you work with. And so I want you to remember these three things. I invite you to remember these three things for today. So don't believe me or anything that I say to you. In fact, I encourage you not to believe anyone just because they might have a platform, a pulpit, a program, or a way of doing things. It's really important that you listen with an open heart so that you can see what resonates for you. And if something that I say today resonates with you, that's great. Experiment with it and see what you discover yourself from using this kind of an approach. And if it doesn't, that's completely okay too. I encourage you, take it off like a pair of shoes that are too small, that pinch. You don't want to wear a pair of shoes around that don't fit. So if this fits for you, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Make sure that you test it for yourself. And so I want to just take a look at the fact that I really believe that we're on an evolutionary journey from an old system of command and control and hierarchical systems of being that create systemic suffering. And I'm talking about the same suffering that I just outlined for you. You know, on one side of the chasm, we've got this systemic suffering that's created by hierarchical systems. And we all know that this is true because we live in a world that's in transition and going from an old command and control system to something new. But what are we going to? Well, I believe that we're going to a new level of consciousness and a system that's compassionate. It's more universal, it's more natural. And this is where we find that we can experience systemic peace, regardless of what's happening outside of us. We can start to understand and be free to be who we are. We can be free to be ourselves in any situation so that our communication is empowered, so that we're energized for our work and for our life. so that your system, you, and what you notice inside of you is the grounding rods, the lightning rods, and the number one place that you go to listen with your whole body, to listen with that energy system, because there's wisdom in your somatic system. There's wisdom that it gives you so that you can actually be a systemic input for all of the systems of your life, and so that you can live the legend that you're here to live. And I believe that each human being that's listening to my voice right now is here with a specific calling, with a specific mission to accomplish before you leave this planet. You know, we have our birthday and then we have our death day, and none of us are getting out of that. We are all going to face those 2 days. We're all here. We got born, but oftentimes we live as if this other day doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. And so it's really important, I believe, to live the life and do the work that you're here to do before you leave. So we've tried lots of different things to cross this chasm. We've tried things that we've learned. We've tried things and then they haven't lasted. We've tried so many different things that have been disappointing because they seem like they're going to last, and then we don't seem to get across this chasm between the old and the new. And I'm here to share with you that I believe that a foundation for this is to create a safe space for your presence, to be who you are, for your heart, for all of the systems of your life, your relationships, your home, your work, and also to do your soul work. And that is the bridge that we cross over to be able to get to the other side. We're not going to do it in the old way. In the old way, we thought that we could get to the other side by working harder, trying harder, all of those different things. You know, I was just listening to Deepak Chopra talking on an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and he said something that was so powerful to me. He said, you know, in the new way is to do less to accomplish more, and to do nothing to accomplish everything. And this is an approach that at first my rational mind wants to argue with. It's like, what are you talking about? Well, this is actually really true, because it's a new level of consciousness. And if you're here listening to this and you're going, I don't know what this guy's talking about, this crazy Canadian, I don't know if he's making sense. That's okay. That's really okay. Trust that you're in the right place and that there's something here for you. And if there isn't, that's okay too. But there may be some real value for you if you're confused right now, or if you're feeling a little bit frustrated, or you have a whole bunch of questions that are coming in for you. That's totally normal. And I encourage you to stay open-hearted, to see what's here for you. So the first time that I performed this work, I think Prasad actually shared some of it. I also did a pilot with a colleague of mine, Caroline Vierman, that Prasad also knows, and it was in a Holland healthcare setting. What I discovered there, and also in the work that I've done elsewhere, is that what high performance is really about is different than what we thought. High performance doesn't happen because of better communications, problem solving, or strategies. High performance really does happen when people feel safe to be who they are, presence. They know that their life systems are supported, heart. And I break life systems down into 3 categories that I won't get into deeply here, but it's really your body, relationships, and your workplace. You know, we spend so much time at work. It's probably about 60% of our waking hours are at work. So there's a huge system there. But are we living and working the life that we know in our heart that we're here to live and work? So we need to feel supported there too, to reach high performance. And then the people that feel like they are performing at their best also know that they're here doing meaningful work that they were born to do. I call that your soul work. And so as you look at this, when a coach, manager, or leader learns how to work with their own life systems consciously, the natural result is a systemic safe space that transforms people and systems at the same time. And so think about it like this. Think about it like it's an orchestra. A systemic safe space is like an orchestra. When people feel safe within their presence, their heart, their soul, they're in tune and they practice every day to be their absolute best. But if they don't feel like it's safe to be present, or their heart or soul are not welcomed or supported, they will be out of tune during all of their performances. And you can already guess what that sounds like or what that feels like for the people in the orchestra, for the people, as well as the people that are in the audience listening to that. There's something that feels just off about it, and we can't quite put our finger on it. Well, it's because systemically we don't feel safe. And without a safe space, performance pressure is pointless. You know, you can take all of the best methods, approaches, and strategies, but they all become pointless if they don't have a foundation of a systemic safe space set up. In fact, all of those great strategies that start out so promising end up being another source of the same problems if they're based in that old consciousness, that old top-down command and control hierarchical consciousness. And so if the conductor doesn't get this, no one else is going to get that either. And so the conductors are the coaches, the managers, the leaders. And if the best coaches, managers, and leaders understand that this is the foundation for all methods, approaches, and strategies. And if they want to have a systemic effect, they need to know how to practically create a foundation on a systemic safe space. And systemic work starts in the one place that is often overlooked. It's often forgotten about, and that is your level of consciousness. And each one of you coaches that are listening to my voice and listening to what it is that I'm saying, you are the system that you're serving. It always starts and comes back to us, each of us, so that we can be an offering in the systems that we're working with and that we're living in. And the truth is that we can't solve the old problems with the same level of consciousness that created it. Einstein was right. We need to have a different form of consciousness. And so we're moving away from an old archetype. And think about it like this. Archetypes are created in ways that serve us really powerfully, but then they start to become a trap after a while. In a fear-based survival culture archetype, it's about separation, it's about survival, it's about output. What can I create? It's very unconscious and incongruent. It's about always a means to an end. There's always an agenda. There's always a strategy that's got a secondary agenda. It's temporary fixes. And then we've got the culture that I call a C7 culture, which is courageous, committed, compassionate, connected, congruent, conscious communication, having conscious conversations. It's co-creative, and it's co-creative with a powerful force that is the universal systemic reality that we live in our world, but also even in our solar system, in our galaxy, and in our universe. And so if you look at this, the old archetypes that we have to work from that are still in our world today are things like colonialism, industrial revolution, capitalism, socialism, communism, all of the different things that we still have in the space. And so the interesting thing about an archetype is that when it's created, it serves a very powerful purpose. It has a philosophy, but it was created by the people who had a level of consciousness that were at that time. And as you move forward 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years, it's interesting, but the truth is the archetypes of the past are still affecting us in our present. And they also contain the consciousness of the people that created them 200 years ago. And when you look at our world today, the world has changed so much, but has the consciousness changed? And that's where we need to get to, is going to a new way of doing things. Now, in organizations, this is no different. If you look at all of the different things that we've got going on in these places, let's just skip this one here. We look at value added information. We look at shareholder value, return on investment, key performance indicators, metrics and measures, risk management, change management, downsizing, engagement, equity, inclusion, and diversity, corporate responsibility, all of these methodologies, agile, operational excellence, and you can fill in the blanks. There's so many different ones that try to help us to bridge from the old to the new, from a fear-based to a new multidimensional culture. But the truth is, without that foundation of a systemic safe space, they all end up collapsing in on themselves over and over again. Now, I want to be really clear. I am not saying that these things are bad or that they're not useful. What I'm saying is that without a foundation of a systemic safe space and a consciousness that is elevated, all of these are doomed to failure again and again, and they will not help us to cross over to this new way of being that is emerging in our world today, because there is a new consciousness rising in our world today that is taking us in a different direction, where there is a place for everybody at the table. And we're no longer talking about single cultures or communities. We're talking about the biggest culture of our planet, the biggest community of our planet, where everyone is included and where the consciousness level goes to a much higher place. And so when we look at this, we've got this transition we're all in, and you can see it because of the systemic suffering and the symptoms that we see in big sectors right now, like healthcare, education, social support, fintech, banking. We have cultural upheaval, and we have systemic suffering where we have systemic racism, systemic bullying, we have harassment and discrimination. All of these different things are not problems to solve. They are messages for us to listen to. And so when you look at this, how do you actually relieve the systemic suffering and create a foundation for transformation? You know, we've got this beautiful music that's created when managers, leaders, and coaches tune in and pay attention to what is happening in their system. But it's when they set up a safe space system for themselves and for each other and for their clients that things begin to change. This has been done, this has to be done intentionally and in very practical meetings. And in my opinion, it's 5 specific foundational meetings that are done with clients, with teams, with organizations that create a foundation for coaches, managers, and leaders, as well as their teams and clients that they work with. And so, you know, the reason why this is so important is because right now, we got to really consider what happens to us as a species if we don't create this kind of a foundation. What happens to the people that we work with? You know, people will continue to suffer, and the systems that are failing will destroy us if we don't listen to their invitation to slow down and create a safe space. Because what I've learned in the last 25 years is that the most effective way to create and serve the systemic transformation that I see happening, as well as relieve suffering, is to set up a safe space support system. And so if you've ever felt pressured to perform or afraid that you won't be able to measure up, you might be understanding what I'm sharing with you today. If you felt struggle to communicate because you can feel that you're attached and you can't actually separate yourself from the systems you're trying to serve, or you're noticing signs of burnout in yourself or your clients, or you keep putting off what's most important because your self-care is really low on your list, you might be relating to what it is that I'm sharing with you. Or maybe you're noticing that you're in fight, flight, and freeze all day long, or your clients are. Maybe you're noticing spillover in your life, or you're noticing that your clients are going home from work and they're spilling over in their lives. Because when you look at this, all of this, you probably can relate to what it is that I'm sharing, because I know that this has been my experience. I know I can relate. So I want to take you back to 2007, and when I was working in what was quote, a successful career managing chaos in oil and gas, petrochemical, utility, managing large infrastructure projects. You know, my career progressed through complex technical project management and then moved into executive leadership and operational excellence for organizations. And I became a specialist in developing successful regional remote teams all over our region, Western Canada, BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, actually BC and Alberta. I became successful, but I was also working 70 to 80 hours a week and managing tens of millions of dollars while I was raising my 3 daughters and trying to navigate the problems and the complex issues of raising 3 daughters by myself, and also working in a career. And I'll tell you, if you've ever experienced anything like that, or you have friends or family that are going through something like that, there's a lot of problems you don't have solutions for, and you just try to get through it. Now, up to that point, I had 3 basic approaches that I took in my life and in my work: react, reduce, or recluse. And so those 3 conditioned responses were to be reactive. You know, this is reactive. This is what you want people to see. But what people don't see and what's really going on inside of you is this. you're screaming at the top of your lungs inside of you. You're reactive. Reactive is oftentimes, I used to move very quickly, and I was a bit like a steamroller where I would just, be so focused on reacting to problems and getting things done that I wasn't paying attention to what was going on inside of me. The world below my neck didn't exist, and the world of people and relationships didn't really exist. People were an ends to my means or a means to my end. So I would react oftentimes. And what ended up happening is everything became reductive. Everything kind of fit into a risk matrix or into my standard operating procedure. And what happened was everything started to look like a nail because the only thing that I had to hit things with was a hammer. And this is where you start to notice that everything is needed to fit into a policy, a procedure, a standard operating procedure. It's very linear, and it's also punitive as well. You might be hearing that old command and control in what I'm saying, because that's what it is. It's command and control. And when all you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail if you're reductive. Then if that didn't work, I would become reclusive. And reclusiveness is when you're working long hours, you're behind computers and by yourself and you're isolated. And it's because you're afraid. I was afraid. And for many years, I struggled with anxiety and PTSD. And I would toggle between these three things while I had 150 people reporting to me in 4 regional locations and was managing 150 to 200 technical teams working on different job sites. I was reactive. I was impatient, I was a workaholic, and I became exhausted, burned out, sleepless. And when I started to notice was stress fractures in my life systems. And the 3 systems, again, are workplace, body, and relationships. And what I noticed was that there was stress for me at work, stress fractures in my team. There was stress fractures at home. And then there was also body stress as well. And eventually things got louder and louder for me in those 3 areas, to the point where I had an autoimmune disease that almost killed me. One of my daughters ended up in the hospital, and the other 2 were struggling, suffering as well. And then in my workplace, I was also noticing HR issues and workplace breakdown and absenteeism that were going on. During that time when it got to the point where my daughters were starting to suffer because of the systemic suffering that I was going through and that I was carrying around inside of me, nothing else became more important than that. Because when it comes right down to it, we don't go to work because of the things that we're going to accomplish at work. At least I didn't. I went to work because of the difference I was going to make in my family's life and the difference I hoped to make in other people's lives. But when my family was suffering and breaking down because of what was going on for me, nothing else became more important than finding a pathway out of this for them and for myself. And so I found my way into a clinical systemic training, and I talked my way into a training for a bunch of counselors and clinicians that worked as counselors. And really, I found my way into a Satir transformational training course that began a journey that lasted the next 18 years of developing a systemic approach. And I won't get into Satir right now, but if you do want to look deeper, please check out Virginia Satir's work, because it's amazing, amazing work. And it's the precursor. Actually, her work is a foundation for a priest of inquiry and things like constellation work and much of the organizational systemic work that we do today. So check her out if you get a chance to. So for me, everything had to genuinely start with me. And what I learned in that course, first and foremost, was that, I went there trying to find a way to help my family, trying to find a way to help my daughters. And what I found out very quickly, it had nothing to do with my daughters at all. It actually had everything to do with me and my system. And for the first time in my life, I had to really look at the fact that what I was doing was actually counterproductive. I was trying to fix the problems for them instead of looking with that big spotlight inside of myself. And so the old way of working harder, faster, and smarter turned into slowing down and learning how to listen systemically. Instead of being responsible for everyone around me, I had to learn how to take responsibility for my own systemic messages, for what was going on inside of me, first and foremost, and then see and discover and experiment with how that became a systemic input for the people around me. And as I looked at that, then I noticed that fear-based performance started to turn into something that was affecting my presence, my heart, my soul, and the performance started to come from a different place. The storms of hypo and hyperarousal started to become messages that were coming from the wisdom of my body. And as I noticed that sacrifice that I was doing in the old system and spilling over, that actually started to have a ripple effect on all of the most important areas of my life. And so as I looked at this, there was a systemic conversation that really was in three areas of my life: my body, my relationships, and my workplace. And all of the systems of my life, as I started to listen inside of me and my system, started to align and become something different. In my family, systems began to change very quickly in the relationship that I have with my daughters. In my body, I started to be able to use my body. Instead of just listening with my ears, I started to listen with my entire system. And then I could apply everything that I learned in my workplace as well with my team. And everything started to align in all three of these areas. So I started to practice, and I had been practicing for a few years and integrating much of the different kinds of work that I had been experiencing with things like Theory U and Otto Scharmer and Peter Senge, Peter Levine, who works with trauma, Daniel Siegel, Stephen Porges, all of these thought leaders. And then I decided to expand my research even further by going to India and traveling and starting my coach training, which I just love the fact that I was able to start that in India. And it just kind of worked out that way circumstantially. I think circumstantially is God's way of remaining anonymous. Then I also integrated indigenous practice and ancient wisdom, because my family has a foundation and a bloodline that goes to the First Nations of North America. And so a lot of the things that I had been ignoring in my life and in my family history, I needed to reintegrate those into my life in ceremony and in family recognition of the bloodline that I carried as well. And so after that, I worked globally with Alan Seal and his community of people, transformational presence coaches all over the world. And then I created a pilot of my own to mentor different teams in the world as well. After that, I tested it in the most difficult place that any coach will ever work, which is their own family. And this is not for the faint of heart. And what I did was I wanted to create a safe space for my family so that we could start to see if that had a systemic effect. And it did. We meet to this day on a weekly call as a family to explore consciousness and to be in our presence with each other, supporting a systemic ripple effect that wants to happen for us as individuals, but also in our family system as well. And so what I really discovered is that the safer the people feel, the faster that they heal. And so there's this sense of freedom that comes when we slow down to the speed of our presence and listen systemically. And today what I do is I work with coaches, leaders, and managers and teams who want to create a safe space support system that nurtures presence, heart, and soul to create systemic relief and evolution. And now I feel really privileged to be here with you today, to be speaking with you. Now, I want to show you a typical day in our family because, this is just the way that we are. This is a couple of years ago, playing outside. That's my grandson, Caleb. That's my daughter, Christiane. That's my daughter, Sarah. And that's my partner, Amanda, off in the distance there. And so that's a typical day. And, one of the things that's really important to understand, because I think that when we talk about things like, systemic work and working from the inside out and, slowing down to the speed of our presence in a world that's going really fast, that can feel incredibly hard. And it has felt really hard for me to develop this in my own practice and with my clients. But at the end of the day, it is the most relevant and practically applied way to work, because when things go wrong, it's most important at that point to slow down to the speed of your presence. And our family's been through a lot of different situations and challenges that I've already shared with you. And I'm not going to get into the detail of that, but I will share one that happened just last October, because it really underscores what can happen when you go in a different direction than that old command and control hierarchical approach. And so obviously all of us know about COVID and all of the different challenges and the real heartache and suffering that has been created by that. And also now we're coming out the other side. So I feel very grateful about that. In October, one of the things that I noticed in 2021 was that our family and many people in the world had different opinions about COVID and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And one of the things that was hard for our family was that we did have different opinions within our family. And, in the old system, you could try and command and control people to do what you want them to do, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work long term. And so we have to learn how to accept one another, and also sometimes the consequences of those choices as well. And so my daughter last October was diagnosed with COVID and got COVID. Well, at that time, she was 8 months pregnant with her second child. And so she ended up in an ICU in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada, where she had to be rushed to the hospital to save her life. She was induced into a coma. And her daughter, Halo, was also in the ICU down the hall from her. And so Christiane was in a coma, Halo was in an incubator, and our family was on the sidelines wondering what was going to happen. And so, one of the things that happened for me at that point was that, even though my family had different opinions at that time, there was a part of me that was really angry about that and really hurt and really afraid. And so we had to pull together, but not at first it was hard to do that. It wasn't until I listened systemically to what it was that was really inviting me. And what it was inviting me was to ask for help, to ask the world for help, to ask other people for help, to ask my family for help. And so that's what I did. And we all came together, and we really created an intention to have inclusion and have togetherness and walk through this, no matter what the results were going to be. Ended up a week later that Christiane came out of the coma. Her daughter was safe. She was safe. She ended up leaving the hospital. And this is Halo. Just yesterday, actually, we were taking care of her, and you can see she's climbing stairs now, so she's in good shape. It's so cool, because now I work with an ICU team as well in the healthcare center on Vancouver Island. And so I have an opportunity to give back to them in the way that they held space for our family in such a powerful way. And so my point with that is that even though we all go through difficult things, and there's a happy ending to this particular story, that doesn't mean that there's not been times when I defined what was happening as an unhappy ending. And there's been lots of things in our family that have happened that have been really difficult, but that are systemically invitations to develop and evolve as human beings. And this is the same thing at work as well. There is no separation for work and home. We are the same people wherever we go. Wherever you go, there you are. And so what I really discovered in all of this, my work with teams and organizations and in my work with my family, is that there are 5 fundamental meetings that can be created that make a real difference and create a safe space support system for you, for your clients, for your family systems. And this is a systemic consciousness coaching program that I've developed, and I'm actually leading teams through and leading coaches through and mentoring people in. And so the way that this works is quite simple. As you go through this, the practice starts with systemic suffering, like we've already covered, but it comes in 5 specific meetings where we can create that set up that systemic safe space environment for people to show up and be their best. The first one is the safe space container meeting. This is where we understand what it is that we need and want to create a safe space. This is where we become aware of our own energy system. We've got to slow down to the speed of our presence to be able to do that. Pillar 2 is a primary purpose meeting. And what that is basically the understanding that there's a reason why I get out of bed in the morning. There's a primary purpose that I have in this world. But in order to access that, I need to actually know that the primary purpose and the top priority of everything for me is to be present in my life, to be present with people, and to learn how to practice presence wherever I am, especially in stressful situations. We need to learn how to be in the eye of the storm. And so that second meeting, that second pillar is the primary purpose meeting, where we learn how to do that. The third meeting is the pressure relief valve meeting. This is a stress relief and debrief meeting where we let go of the pressure and the stress, and we learn how to do that energetically so that we can let go and translate the information of stress, anxiety, and unresolved trauma or unresolved emotions into energetic empowerment, so that we can use that as a systemic input for the places we're called to work and to live. And so that's the third meeting. We have to have a safe space, and we need to learn how to witness one another so that we can open that pressure relief valve and let the pressure out and do it regularly and intentionally. The fourth meeting is to learn how to have a conscious conversation. Now, in organizations, we call this conflict resolution. But in my experience, conflict resolution is the worst way to resolve or to create consciousness, because it keeps recreating the same thing over and over again. You might have temporary fixes, but you aren't having a conscious conversation. And so the fourth phase is to create a conscious conversation. And then the fifth pillar is to learn how to prioritize presence at work. This is incredibly important, because being present with each other is actually, for the most part, in the old system, it's last, if at all, on the list. In fact, even having a safe space like I'm describing and doing regular meetings, if you ask your clients how often they do these kinds of meetings with their teams or with their people, you're going to find that it's either once a quarter in a team building session or not at all. And oftentimes, even if they are meeting, they're not meeting in this way, they're meeting in the old way. So it just becomes about what we're going to get done, what operational problems we have, et cetera, et cetera. But really, to transition from systemic suffering and to create an environment where we become systemic leaders, safe space leaders, we need to learn how to create a safe space with presence. And so this is an experiential and evidence-based mentorship program that I've created, where we've got those three systems of our life, our body, our relationships, and our workplaces are all working together. This is based on some of the work that has been done by Project Aristotle in psychological safety with Google. This is Daniel's. And of course, we've got Amy Edmondson as well, who is the person that invented and coined the phrase psychological safety. And then we've got Stephen Porges. And these are just some of the thought leaders that are talking about the neurobiological system that we have inside of our body, as well as what the most important ingredient in safety is today in organizations, which they're finding is psychological safety over and over again. The other thing that I try to deconstruct and demystify are the myths, misconceptions, and mistakes that keep coaches stuck and keep managers and leaders stuck. A few of them that I'll mention here, and I can't go deeply into this because I want to leave some time for an exercise and also some questions at the end, but there are many mistakes and myths that are really emphasized today that are getting in people's way. And so there's the first one that I'll share with you, which is the safe space myth. And what that is this idea that we can create a safe space while also being afraid and thinking about the performance that we're doing as well. And this is something that all coaches and managers and leaders that I've spoken with deal with, and I do as well. So if you've experienced this, you're not alone. And so you cannot create a safe space while you're also afraid of what it is that you're going to create. When you're in a space with a person and you're thinking about the result that they're going to get as a result of your coaching, that's what I'm talking about. There's a performance pressure that's underneath that. Well, that's not good or bad. It's not something you're doing that's wrong, But it is a mistake to think that you can create a safe space without paying attention to that energy dynamic that's going on inside of you. And so there's a specific way to work with that so that you can transform it and create a more expansive, safe space for you as well as for your clients. So that's the first one. The second one is that this idea that clients need to be first myth. Now, this is a bit of an oxymoron or a contradiction, because usually when you go into, and in the old system, when you are thinking about value add, you go into situations and you're looking at what you can provide. And so you make the customer first, you make the client first. They're the ones that got to be first. Well, if you're going to work systemically, you've got to learn how to slow down and notice what it is that's going on inside of your energy system first and foremost, so that you can be an offering that creates a safe space for the client so that they can be first. Because if you don't do that first systemic step, really you're reacting to what's happening in front of you. You're trying to solve problems instead of creating a safe space. And if you're trying to solve a problem or create value or, do that kind of a thing, really that is putting you first in a way that is somewhat unhealthy systemically. And so we need to learn how to slow down and listen with our whole body, with our whole energy system, so that we can put ourselves first. It's just like when you're flying on the airplane and they tell you, if you're with your children, who do you put the oxygen mask on first? Do you put it on your kids first or on you? No, it's got to be you every time, so that you can be there to help your child and other people, and also so that you don't distract people that are helping others that need help. So this is the second myth. The third myth is this idea that you can detach yourself from the system, you can be outside the organization and keep yourself separate. This is one that is really tricky, because the natural reaction when you go into a stressful situation is to try and remain outside of it. But the truth is that once you are in it, you are the system. You are a reflection of the system, and the system is reflecting you. And so the place to work has got to be inside of you. And so that's what it is that I teach and train people to do. You can't detach yourself from the system. You are the system. And so the access point has got to be through you, so that you can make a huge change and have impact in the world. The other one is the I don't have time for this myth. This is a big one. And you probably hear this from your clients and from yourself at times as well. It's like, I don't have time to slow down. I don't have time to breathe. You don't understand the places that I work. Well, everybody just take a deep breath right now. Just take a deep breath and feel what that feels like. The truth is, I do understand. When you look at the sectors like healthcare, education, and social work, everything is moving so quickly that we have no choice but to slow down. And the reason why we don't have time and space is because we don't take time and space to slow down. When we do that, our consciousness begins to shift and change. So this is a huge myth, because it's actually creating the problem that we say we have. And the last one is the people don't have time for this too. This idea that my clients are going too fast. I can slow down, but they can't slow down. Well, that's also a myth and a mistake too, because your inability to slow down and recognize that what they really need is to learn how to slow down to the speed of their presence as well, is actually causing the very problem that you see. In fact, if you look at all of these, they're all systemic mistakes, systemic symptoms that are causing the problems that we're experiencing over and over again. And so really, you've got to look at this in a new way. And so a multidimensional systemic conversation is happening where you are the systemic input. You are the system for you, your clients, your teams, and your systems. This is also what creates your company. And this is the difference between creating a business and creating a company. When you create a business, I suspect that oftentimes we're trying to do that in a very top-down command and control way, and we create nothing but busyness when we create a business. But when we look at our company and the company we keep and the company we are for other human beings, we're creating from a different place. We're creating systemically. And so we can use this approach to create our work in the world as well. And the whole idea of this is to stay congruent in our own energy system and also accomplish the soul legend that you're here to accomplish. And so take out a piece of paper. We're going to do an exercise together to give you a bit of a taste of what it means to work systemically. And then we'll have some time to converse and talk at the end. So I'll give you everybody a minute to get out a piece of paper and a pen. And what you're going to do is just as best you can write this grid in your workbook or on your piece of paper. And once you've done that, put a yes or a Y in the chat so that I know that you're complete. Thanks, Danyog. Danyog's done. Ravi's done. Priyanka's done. Give it a couple more seconds. We've got time, so there's no rush. Once you got your paper ready, just put a yes or a Y in there. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Nazarius. A few more seconds. Thanks, Prasad. Gayatri, thank you. Arvind, Nikhil, Laura, thank you. Okay, great. So now that you have that paper and you've drawn out a bit of a grid here, just what is a topic that's got your attention right now in a really simple form? Just boil it down to one word or a very short sentence and put the topic at the center of this grid. What's the topic that has your attention and that maybe causes a reaction for you or is something that you're dealing with right now in your life or in your work? And put that topic in the middle of this grid. I'll give everybody a second to do that. And once you've got the topic there, put the paper down in front of you with the topic and your pen down and just have it in front of you. And take a deep breath and just notice what you notice right now. The first step is to notice and acknowledge and recognize what's happening in your system. And it's really important to do this with your body and not just your head. In the old command and control systems, we really use our intellect as the primary intelligence. But what we're doing with this now is we're starting to drop down into the rest of our body. And so just notice and acknowledge where you notice this in your body. Take a deep breath to acknowledge and recognize that. Where is it that you notice it in your body? Even put your hand on it if it's your gut, or if it's your chest, or if it's your throat. And just notice it and feel it, and take a deep breath to notice where it is in your body. And notice the sensations that are there as well. What does it feel like? Is there and just describe it. Is there a constricting, or is there a burning? Does it feel nauseous? What are the words that describe the way it feels in your body? And take a deep breath to just notice those things, notice those sensations. Now, as you notice that, just notice how long has it been there? Don't be exact. Don't worry about being exact. Has it been there for a long time? Is this a familiar feeling that you've got in your body in relationship to this? Is this familiar for you? Just notice that as well. And as you notice all of those things, take a moment and write that down in the grid where those questions are on your paper. Where is it in your body? What does it feel like? And how long has it been there? So write that down as well. Now, as you're writing, here's the challenge to you. The invitation to you is to continue to breathe in your body and notice whether or not you go right to your head when you start to write, which is typically what happens for most of us that are used to being in that command and control energy. That's okay. It's not wrong. Just keep breathing down into your body as you write. And once you've got that all written down, then put your pen back down again. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Now that you've got that written down, put your pen and your paper down again. And just notice with appreciation, how has this served you? Now, if you look at this and you think, you know, I don't really like this, it's one of those things that I would like to not be in my life, and it's there, that's okay. Just notice that everything that's happened so far has gotten you to where you are today. And can you take a moment and appreciate that? Can you appreciate anything about this particular topic or this trigger for you? How has this served you? And tap into it again to let it tell you. How is this serving you right now? Can you appreciate it? And can you also notice the ways that it's not serving you? And notice both sides of that. How is it no longer serving you? Now, once you have some information on that, feel free to write that into the grid where the questions are as well. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to do that. How is this serving you, or how has this served you in the past? Can you appreciate that? And can you also appreciate the way it's no longer serving? How is it no longer serving? And write those things down. Now that you have those things written down, we'll move into the third quadrant, which is acceptance. Now, acceptance is taking a deep breath and accepting everything that you've experienced so far with this topic, and acknowledging and appreciating and now accepting. Can you let go of having to make this different in any way? This is literally an invitation to let go of command and control and to take a deep breath and let go and surrender rather than trying to make it different. And that's the difference in the energies right there. Are you trying to make something different, or are you willing to accept it and let go of trying to make it different, and taking a deep breath and literally letting it go? And only you can decide that. Now, what I can say is that accepting it is not the same as liking it. You don't have to like it. And also, you can let go of it just for right now and see what that feels like. Can you let go of this just for right now and see what that feels like? By taking a deep breath and literally letting go of the energy of trying to make this different. And then taking another deep breath and letting a little more go. Can you do that right now too? Now, if you're willing to make the commitment to letting go, as you notice the trigger, write that down in that quadrant. Are you willing to accept this and let go of trying to make it different, so that your consciousness elevates to a different place? Write that down in that quadrant if you're willing to let that go. And now we go to allowing. Now put your pens and your papers down for now, and let's go through this last part without any writing. Look at the page in front of you. And we're going to go through a process that my friend and colleague, Alan Seal, has created. I just love. It's called the 3 questions. And so this is the quadrant of allowing. And what we're here now to do is to really take a deep breath. Now, as you are in your chair and you're looking at everything on the page, just close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath to allow the chair to hold your body and to feel what it is that's inside of you right now, and to just take a deep breath to be with all of it, to recognize it, and to acknowledge it. This is the first breath of acknowledgement. So take a deep breath of acknowledgement. Then with everything that you're noticing, there is a sense of appreciation that you're invited into, where you appreciate all the parts of who you are. Can you take a moment and appreciate how far you've come? And appreciate the way that your approach to this particular topic has served you. And helped you to get to where you are today. And can you also appreciate the ways that your approach is no longer serving? So take a deep breath to appreciate. And now that you notice all of that and appreciate it, take a deep breath to let go of trying to command and control this. Surrender if you're willing, and let go of trying to make this different in any way. Now, as you notice all of this, as you notice this, what is it that you notice that is wanting to happen for you at a higher level? What is this really about for your highest and best good? What is it that wants to happen for you in this area? Take a deep breath to listen and sense and feel what it is that wants to happen. And as you notice what wants to happen, who do you notice that this particular topic is developing you to be? Who is this developing you to be? What are the characteristics that are being developed for your highest and best good right now? Take a deep breath to pay attention to that. And what is the next right step for you that this is asking you to take? What's the action, the energy action step this is asking you to take? Now take a moment and write down any notes that are important to you about this exercise that comes from this topic. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to just take any notes that are important. And also answer the question after you're done with the notes that are important for you to take away today for yourself. What are you learning about systemic coaching? What are you learning about systemic consciousness coaching? Write those notes down as well. And so as you write those notes down, I also promised Prasad and Shanti that I would provide a little bit of resource as well. And so I have set up some resources on my website that you can access. If you go to www.tracehobsontraining.com, there are some things that you can sign up and get sent to you, some PDFs, etc. And also you can reach me at tracehobsontraining.com. If you'd like to email me, I can, if you have any questions, that don't get covered in our session today, then we can also talk about that too. And so I want to just open up now to a few things. First of all, just to complete what we've just done, just everybody come, if you feel comfortable, please come on camera and let's be together and spend the last few moments together for the last 11 minutes we have. And just take a moment now and in one word, put in the chat in one word, and I know that's tough, but I'm asking specifically for a reason this way. In one word, what is it that you are learning about systemic consciousness coaching? Put that in the chat. I'll give you, okay, 3 words, up to 3 words. So put that in the chat and just share that with us, and we can start to share with each other what that is. So holistic, Anu, thank you. Nikhil says somatic consciousness. I am the system, integrated awareness, being myself, somatic, purpose-driven, aligned. Me at the center. Yeah, it really is. So I want to just hand it over now to my gracious hostesses, and just let them know that any questions that come up, some of the burning questions that may come up after seeing this presentation, want to give people a chance to ask any questions that they would like to ask.
Absolutely, Trace. We'll have Jayashree ask the question in the text chat and a few that came in from the questions that we collected during the registration. And to give you a breather, let me just introduce people to the next session, which is Unlearning to Coach, how to get out of your own way and become the best coach you can be. I'll put the registration link in the text chat while you're registering and typing in questions for Trace. Jayashree, over to you for presenting questions to Trace.
Thank you, Shanti. Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Hi, Trace. Lovely session that I was listening into, and there are 2 questions on the chat that I'm going to start with. One is from Arvind, who wants to know, how would you define a systemic safe space? What all would it include? Maybe if you can, reiterate that for us.
Sure. So what it includes in a very practical application for organizations and teams is 5 fundamental meetings that you do with a client and mentor them in for their team. Most of the people on this are working with individual clients who work with teams. And so the safe space system is set up with those 5 fundamental meetings that are there for the people to feel safe, to actually experience that. And so the first one I covered in the session, and it's recorded too, so you can go back and have a look at it, is the safe space container. What is it that I want and need to feel safe? The second one is the primary purpose, which is, yes, what gets me out of bed in the morning, but also what is the primary purpose for me to stay present and to practice presence. And then the third one is the stress relief and debrief meeting for people that are working in systemic pressure. And so how do we create that as well? So basically, those 5 meetings you create intentionally with your clients and with your teams so that they experience systemic coaching, they experience a safe space and an elevation of their consciousness at the same time. Then all the practical things they do in their roles and their responsibilities become shifted, and the ripple effect starts to affect the whole system of the organization.
Thanks, Tracy. And we have a further question on that from Sayog, which is, as you create this systemic safe space, what questions would get the group to start the conversation? Yeah,
so the conversation can't start until there is a container, a safe space container that's created with those pillars. The first pillar being the most important one, which is, what do I need and what do you need to feel safe? And I'm not talking about what do you need to talk about safety, because we talk about things a lot in organizations and in teams. What I'm talking about is, no. What is it that we need to experience safety? So the first question the coach needs to ask of themselves, what do I need to feel safe? What do I want to feel safe? And then when you have those answered in a very specific way, the coaches that I mentor take this to a very deep level, and then they are able to ask their clients, their teams, the same question, and they develop a team charter as a result of that. This becomes the foundation for the systemic coaching. So the questions really are starting that simply. What is it that you need and want to feel safe? And then the questions become different as you go through those other 4 pillars that I described. So I'm seeing another question in the chat as well from Anu. In an organizational setup, as much as safe space is needed, one also has results to be attained. How does one balance this? I love this question, because this is really underscoring the big shift that's going on in organizations today, where we're learning how to work in a different way. We still will have the same methods, the same strategies, the same goals, but we will attain them in a different way, from the inside out rather than the outside in. So that question that you're asking is one that I've asked myself many, many times, and that everybody asks themselves, because there's a tension inside of you that's existing there with that particular question. And that's the systemic input for you to follow, like a thread to pull on, so that you can actually have a different experience with that, rather than just going to a methodology. Because I could say, well, yes, Anu, what you do is steps 1, 2, and 3 to get the result. And then how does that feel for you when I say that? It's linear. It's not working with complexity. And the truth is, now everything's moving so fast and so complex that we can't keep up to it with those old approaches. So I love your question, because it's practical. And so what I've discovered is that when we work in this way, the practical results begin to happen from the inside out. People, first of all, feel like they can be connected to each other. That C7 culture starts to happen, where people commit to supporting each other. They recognize that, probably work is not the most important thing to me in my life, right? Like, I think that there might be some other things that are important too. That doesn't mean that I don't want to do well in my work. It just means that I have to look at this systemically. I have to stand back, and I need support to be able to do that. Do you support my presence, my heart, and my soul? And so the results that come out of that, I can prove over and over again with data from Amy Edmondson, from Project Aristotle, from many sources. But even with those proofs, we're still talking about a linear way of thinking. So I know I'm not answering your question maybe the way that you would like me to, but that's okay. That's okay. The results will come, and they always do, but they always start in you first.
Yeah. Trace, I'm going to ask the next question. I think Jayashree is struggling to log in. And the question is from Nazarius. What is your experience with teaching this method to senior leaders worldwide? What is their response? Because they come from the world of ROIs.
The world of what?
Return on investments, ROIs.
Ah, yes, ROI is the most important thing to all of us, right? ROI. Well, here's the real truth of it, though. Senior leaders, more than anybody else, know that the systems that they work in are disintegrating all around them. The reality is that people cannot withstand the kind of systemic suffering that we have going on in large systems anymore, in large organizations anymore. Even medium-sized organizations are suffering. And if you look at this, there's a generational gap that's created as well. And senior leaders can feel the gap between them and the rest of their people. It's getting bigger and bigger, and they want to fill it. So how do they fill it? Well, first of all, senior leaders are human beings. We oftentimes want to put them in a category all by themselves and just think, you know, the senior leaders are way up here, but they're not. They're just people, and they're people just like you and me. And they also have families. They also have feelings. They might not be in touch with those. And so ROI is really important. What does it matter if a senior leader gets to the end of his life or her life and discovers that they have sacrificed everything to get to the ROI that is important to them? So we have to actually reframe what success means. Return on investment is important. Shareholder value is important. But we need to arrive at it in a way that doesn't burn down the house at the same time. You know, our planet is on fire right now. And if we don't make a change in the way that we do things, we're not going to survive. Our organizations won't survive. That leader's not going to survive. None of us are going to survive. So we have to actually get honest about that. And so ROI is incredibly important, but what kind of ROI are we talking about? Are we talking about a ripple effect that's going to affect the whole world? Or are we talking about just getting some money in your bank?
Trace, one last question, and this was in the questions we'd asked during registrations, which I didn't see getting answered, is who and how do we contract with when engaging systemic coaching?
Can you ask that question a little bit differently? I'm not sure I understand it.
So who and how do we contract with in systemic coaching?
So who's our customer?
Yeah, probably. And if you remember who had asked that question, you want to clarify, and if you're here, please do so.
Yeah. So when you look at this, the systems that you serve, any organization is part of a system, and the indications or symptoms that you're going to find in that organization are going to come through senior leadership, middle management, or HR. We're problem transformers. Used to be we were problem solvers, but we got to listen to it systemically. It doesn't mean that the problems still aren't the same. They are. They're just interpreted differently. So the problems that people are engaged with right now in a big way are people are leaving. Absenteeism is a huge issue. There's bullying, harassment, and discrimination going on in organizations, and this is causing huge loss financially. So those conversations are happening all the time. Engagement with millennials is a huge issue. Millennials don't put up with that old command and control hierarchical system anymore. They just leave. And so that's a huge problem as well. So anybody that's experiencing those problems, those are the people that you have something to offer to when you go to organizations and engage them.
Yeah. I'm hoping the person who asked the question found the answer. My understanding and my takeaway is in systemic coaching, the audience space is very large. You may be contracting with the person, but the impact is much wider. My key takeaway from the session, and I think I've noted it and put it in a box, is you are the system you're trying to serve. I think that statement stays with me. And thank you so much, Trace. I'm getting lots of thank you for organizing this session on a one-on-one, and I'm very happy to see that people thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you for taking time so early in the morning, people. It is now probably around 7:30 a.m. his morning, and he started with us when it was just about 6 a.m. in the morning. So thank you so much for being with us and spending this time with us. Thank you.
Yeah, Shanti, I appreciate you. I appreciate Bengaluru, the Bengaluru coaches, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing. If there are questions, send me the questions, and I will do my best to answer any questions that I didn't get to here as well, so that people get the answers that they need. Okay.
Appreciate that, Trace. Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Trace. See you next week again. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.